Terrific, thank you. Good evening. Welcome to this meeting of Needham Unites Against Racism Working Group for December 21st, 2020. This group is meeting subject to the open meeting law pursuant to the governor's executive order of March 12, 2020 related to the emergency in the Commonwealth due to COVID-19. This is a public meeting under open meeting law, and we are participating remotely in this meeting. The fact that we are meeting remotely ensures reasonable public access, and I see we have a few attendees, but the meeting will not feature public comment. So I do note the meeting's being recorded and that everybody participating by video means whatever's in your background is for everybody to see. All right, so tonight we have a couple of items to start with. The minutes of November 16th and December 7th, 2020. If I could have a motion for approval.
So moved.
Second.
And I need to do a roll call vote in order to vote on them. So thank you for that. Matt?
Yes.
Sue?
Yes.
Jen?
Yes.
Marcus?
Yes.
Jay?
Yes.
Ramin?
Yes.
Natasha?
Yes.
And I think that's everybody, and the chair votes yes. So the meeting minutes are approved. We are going to go through a number of things, but we're going to start this evening with a presentation from the superintendent about the REAL Coalition. After this presentation, we'll have some discussion about sort of what our takeaways are and what next steps might be. And we'll do that with an eye to coming back and looking at our draft schedule and deliverables. So kind of hold that thought as we're listening to the superintendent, but he is going to, he and his team are going to catch us all up here with the work that has been ongoing for multiple years with the REAL Coalition. Let us know where they are. And I particularly asked the ways in which we might be helpful to their work. So with that, Dr. Gutekunst, if you can take it away.
I certainly can. And Ms. Sinkat, I'll ask if you allow me to share the screen, or borrow the screen, if you will, for a little bit. So thank you. And I want to thank and welcome Dr. Joanne Allen Willoughby, who is the district's Medco director and also has assumed leadership for the REAL Coalition, and Mary Lammy, who's our assistant superintendent for student support services. Both Joanne and Mary have really been, frankly, the force behind, along with many, many staff members and families and students behind our efforts around equity. So I think that's important. And I guess as I share a presentation with you this evening, I don't want to be pedantic or too wordy, but I will ask you to think about as you see some of the information, including, I typically don't do this, but on one of the slides, I have embedded a 5-minute news clip from the Needham channel that I thought really provided some great information on a program that has been launched this year that's related to our work. And I think it's worthwhile to view. So that's part of the presentation. As you watch any of this, think about, if you will, ways that we can become partners, certainly, and even greater voices within the community. I noticed in the list of attendees that there are a few Needham High School alum. These young people had reached out previously over the summer to the community and asked if action could be taken and if they could at least in some way participate in the discussions going on. And I had invited them to attend this meeting so they can understand, learn about a little bit more of some of the things that they care deeply about and that we also care deeply about in the schools. So with that, allow me to share a presentation here. And if you'll let me do that. I think I want to begin with letting you know that everything that we're talking about this evening begins with equity, and it means lifting all students and lifting student voices. And I'm highlighting this picture with you, not because I'm in it, and it's unfortunate, frankly, because of the 5 amazing young people, one of whom is a graduate, a recent graduate, and the others are all, 2 are graduates actually, and the rest are attending the Needham Public Schools. And one of the things that's become a tradition at our back to school meetings is bringing students to our meetings to welcome staff back, perhaps tell their stories, and really help get us off to a great start. And I was really thrilled last year, which was our last in-person staff meeting, to invite these amazing young people. And although, you know, a picture tells a lot of stories, but it doesn't tell the full story. You know, within this amazing group of young people, we have a transgender student. We have a young woman who recently was an immigrant, a refugee actually from Syria, speaking no English. And in the midst of her first year at Pollard, ended up being part of the student talent show, belting out some songs on the stage. And we have a student with significant physical disabilities. And well, I guess really what we have are the faces and the stories of the Needham Public Schools and these young people, along with so many other stories. And it was really an honor to welcome them, to meet with our faculty, to tell and share their stories, and really allow the staff to understand that our role is to lift all students, not some of them, but all of them. And it also means including their voices in our work. So let me tell you a little bit about the REAL Coalition, or the Race, Equity, Access, and Leadership Coalition. We developed this structure, if you will, this group, as a result of the equity audit we conducted about 2.5 years ago. And the purpose of the REAL Coalition is really to provide a forum, a structure to lead and guide our efforts to eliminate barriers and to achieve anti-racist activities and a culture in the Needham Public Schools community. And we also are committed to make sure that we engage the staff, students, families, and communities, as we're doing in this, not only in conversations, but also in actions that promote practices, equitable practices, and anti-racist practices for the entire community. Just a little bit about the REAL Coalition. It's only been a couple of years. We have within the REAL Coalition district leaders, teachers, community members, parents, teachers, and students. And within the coalition itself, it's part of a 3 levels or 3 tiers. We have the larger coalition, which aims to meet about 3 times during the course of a calendar year. 3 or 4 times. There is a steering committee which guides our efforts, and then there are subcommittees which have these 6 broad areas, and these are all actually quite important. This is where a lot of our work happens, where we think about policies and practices in support of equity. Actually, Sue Neckis on your committee has been part of the subcommittee on this, and this is actually where the school committee comes in some ways to make sure that a review of policies are in support of our efforts around anti-racism and equity. There's also a curriculum instruction subcommittee where we think about what is going on in the classroom as far as teaching and learning. Professional learning to support our educators so that they have the skills, the mindset, and we hope the perspective to support this work. Also, we've been thinking deeply about, and we've made some incremental and progress in this area of hiring a diverse workforce. And so we look at our hiring and employment practices and think creatively about how we can continue to recruit and support our teachers of color. And then there is another important subcommittee on culture and climate in our schools, what's going on with our students and how they're learning and supporting one another and the communities. And then of course, how do we communicate with the larger community about our work? So that's the 3-tiered system of the REAL Coalition. Just to share with you some of our work, some of our accomplishments. And by the way, I'll make sure that you get this slideshow so you have a copy of it for your records, and you can explore some of the links on here. I won't go to all of them, although I will tackle some of the links because I'd like to share some of the specific and concrete things that have happened. And I'll begin with maybe the second item. We've supported an elementary racial literacy task force. More on that in a little bit. We've also been working at the middle school on our Social Justice League and our Launching Scholars program for students of color, which is related to and complements the high school's Castle Scholars program. We've been thinking about restorative practices at Needham High School. The staff there has, with some training from Suffolk University, has been very much involved in, and Dr. Alan Willoughby can talk about this, but very much involved in thinking differently about discipline practices at the high school. We also have at the high school Students Advocating for Equity, which supports our efforts and we support their efforts, a variety of different frameworks and culturally responsive teaching. And one of the things we're very, very excited about is our Portrait of a Needham Graduate, which is our 5-year strategic plan. We are in the second year, or I'm going to say year 1.5 because of our interruption with COVID of the strategic plan. And that is a shared vision of the future we see for all of our students. And we specifically mention one of the 5 competencies that we expect of a Needham High School graduate, and this is after an experience pre-K through 12, we expect that a student will become socially and culturally responsible, including making sure that the student is part of an anti-racist culture and community. I do want to point out, because this comes up a lot in the community, I get questions from the press, I get questions from parents, I get questions from students about what do we do when something happens in the schools. I'm not going to read to you this very long document. It is on the website, and I'll direct your attention to where it is. What I want you to understand is that one of the things that has changed, at least I believe, in a very positive way in the Needham Public Schools, and we're one of the few school systems I know, because this has been widely, folks have asked for this document, not only from Massachusetts, but other states as well. We have decided that we want to have a specific protocol when we need to respond to an act of bias or hate in the Needham Public Schools. There was a time, and perhaps it was recently, it certainly is alluded to in our equity audit, and I know that it happens in other districts, and I know that I was responsible as a building principal for letting this happen. There was a time when if a student made a demeaning or a racist or a hateful comment, it was much easier to sweep it under the rug, have everyone be quiet, perhaps suspend a student, and move away and deal with it quietly. We have decided as a school community, we won't do that anymore. Instead, what this document suggests is that we will call out the behavior and not only deal with the student who may be responsible, more importantly, deal with the students and the staff who are impacted by the act of bias or of hate. So I point this out to you because this really is now the way we act. There's specific procedures, including involving the superintendent, our school resource officer, and the process and the steps that a principal should take with the staff to make sure that the community is safe, the community is whole, and that we have supported an impacted or marginalized student and staff. So I just wanted to share that with you because it is something that that does come up a lot, and I wanted you to know about it. We also, and this is something that we're very pleased and excited about, that we have, we're in our third year, I think, in some ways, with our Courageous Conversations on Race, which is a full year course at the high school, a credit-bearing course where our students are involved in educating the high school community about race and racism and equity. And they specifically are responsible for workshops to 9th graders that all 9th graders participate in. They're modeling this behavior for the adults on staff as well. It is in many ways what we're trying to do is to develop a coherent K through 12 continuum of not only conversations, but a curriculum that will support our efforts around race and equity. We also have had a professional development day, as we did just before Thanksgiving. I'll mention at the end our equity website. Actually, no, I'll mention this now. This is a website specifically for our staff. It is, Mary, I think it's available that can anybody access this, Mary?
Yes, it's front facing as a way to share with the community the work and the opportunities and the resources that we're making available to our teachers.
Okay. Okay, so it is available, and it shares a variety of different professional learning opportunities and initiatives that are going on throughout the community for folks to participate in. As you'll see when I'm about to show you, is that we've also, to complement Courageous Conversations on Race and some of our other work, we've launched this year a new racial literacy curriculum. And this is the piece that I said was usually don't do this. This is a 6-minute piece with some intros that I'm going to ask that you perhaps listen to, pay attention to, because I think it really does highlight what we're trying to do very, very clearly and specifically in our schools, beginning at the elementary level.
How is diversity and racial equity taught to the very youngest children in Needham Public Schools? In order to align pre-K to 12 anti-racist instructional practices, Needham launched the racial literacy curriculum across all 5 elementary schools in the fall. To learn about the approach and goals of the program, municipal producer Yu Xiaowen spoke with Newman School Assistant Principal Andrea Vargas and Middle School Social Studies Curriculum Coordinator Brooke Kessel, who co-lead the project.
How did Needham Elementary Schools teach about race before, and what's new in this curriculum?
Our literature reflects different cultures and races. I think that our classroom libraries have changed a lot as a result. And again, there's some wonderful bright spots across our district where teachers are teaching about race and culture, but it wasn't consistent. So if you're in a different 3rd or 4th grade class, you might have access to different lessons, and we wanted something that would be consistent. And then as we build up year to year, the teachers in the following.
I just want to stop for a second. Can you see the video and sound?
I can only hear the
can
sound.
hear.
I can't see the video.
We're only, I see the
I
only
see the
sound.
video, but it's static.
Can you hear the sound? Okay.
Yes.
Well,
That's a good thing.
And it's working fine that way. If that's, that option is okay. I just wanted to let you know.
how about that? Can you see that?
It's the same.
It's the same.
Yeah.
I hear it just fine though. There's no movement.
Yeah. We're going to go ahead here.
And so our teachers have worked incredibly hard to diversify their curriculum, their instructional materials, and their pedagogical approaches so that our students are able to make meaning of the past, make reasoned interpretations of the present, and to be leaders in the future. And so what's, I think, particularly exciting about this project is now we're able to think more system-wide. It's not just our secondary teaching teams, but we're thinking about our preschool, our elementary schools, our middle schools, and our high school.
Explain to me the structure of the curriculum and how it is designed to help students understand more difficult concepts and handle such discussions as they move up grades.
In kindergarten, for example, students begin learning about skin and what's its biological function, and they learn about different skin colors. They make their own skin color as part of an art project. And this moves all the way throughout the grades until in 3rd or 4th grade, students are studying activists, different civil rights activists, and how one person can make a difference and change the world. And then finally in 5th grade, students are learning more about immigration and the forced movement of people that make up American demographics. And they also start to learn more about the different contributions of immigrants and people who were forced to be here in a way that reflects who we are currently. So for instance, in the new racial literacy curriculum, there are lessons focused on the connections between geography and culture in grades 2 and grade 4. And that same idea is echoed in our grade 7 curriculum. So our essential question in grade 7 is, how does where you live affect how you live? Which is a question that kids at any age can latch onto. So as they're going through the curriculum, as they are experiencing these different lessons, we're able to make connections between past lessons and help them deepen their understanding over time. We have middle school teachers who are eager to learn what's happening at the elementary schools and find out, well, what can I do? How does my curriculum need to change? How can I build on this great foundation from our elementary teachers in my own classroom?
What do you think is the key of talking to young students about race, especially at elementary level?
Teachers need to be comfortable having conversations about race. And most of our staff in Needham are white. And it could be said that generally teachers have less experience in talking about race as white people. And I think that's something that we continue to work on as a district. So they need practice in having those conversations. I saw Zaretta Hammond speak a few years ago. She is the guru of culturally responsive teaching. And one thing she said that I heard loud and proud was, you know, white people don't have enough experience with this. Practice it. Keep talking about race until you get comfortable. And I think, you know, in the past, many teachers grew up thinking it's actually exacerbating racial issues to talk about race and to mention race and notice race. We're learning just the opposite now. We're learning that these conversations help so much. Our continued professional development is vital. We've had speakers come in to talk to our staff twice since the school year began, and we have a lot of planning time that's set aside for addressing issues of equity too. So that's really vital to our individual and communal growth and progress as well. And then once we have those skills, and again, that a bit of comfort. I won't say total comfort. If you're completely comfortable, you're not doing the work right? It should be a little bit uncomfortable as we enter into the conversations. And once we're able to do that, hopefully we can provide that for children as well.
Really what we're looking for is to create a comprehensive social studies program, as well as looking at our other disciplines and thinking about, okay, if our goal is to help foster racial literacy and an anti-racist and anti-bias school system, then how does this work impact everything that we teach and how we teach it? And so it's not just that one lesson this week or two lessons next week, but it's the very way we understand the past and teach about it.
What are the general feedbacks from parents?
Generally, parents have come to me saying, I want to talk about race more with my child. I'm just not sure how. What if I mess it up? And we wonder about that as parents and as teachers all the time. Individual schools are having principal copies or other events that are introducing the new racial literacy curriculum to the parent community. Additionally, there is a parent companion guide for the curriculum that we will be distributing, at least in parts, to parents. It has some extra activities that parents can do at home, and it clarifies some vocabulary that's really important for the conversations. We have had some concerns from parents who may feel a different approach is needed or have some concerns about the lessons. All of that feedback is so valuable in terms of helping us craft what works for our community.
Okay. Well, clearly I need a Zoom lesson on.
For 22 years, the Needham Women's Club has hosted an annual holiday house tour to raise funds to support the club and their.
I clearly need a lesson on showing a video on Zoom, so I'll get on that. Mary, you got to teach me that one. So with thanks to, this is embedded in the slides I'll send you, so you have an opportunity to see it. What you missed is some of the slides that show some of the materials and some students in action in some of the classrooms. Let me move on here, though, to tell you that the other part of our work involves trying to communicate. And I have to tell you, in many ways, it's our biggest challenge, because frequently parents, members of the community, want to know, what exactly are you doing? Are you doing anything? And so we really have to continue to think about how we can communicate what's going on, both within the schools and within the community. And I will not go on to all of these links right now, but within the district's website, we have different some interviews, an article that was recently in the school superintendents, the AASA School Administrator magazine, about what we are trying to do, and other efforts around communication, all of which, and I will do this, I'll take a moment to do this, our website, that aside from the one that teachers have access to, and certainly the community on our professional learning, this includes a lot of the folks who are involved in our efforts, and some of the different resources that we have available for not only teachers and students, but for the community. I guess lastly, I'll just end where I began, and that is, it's increasingly apparent to me as your superintendent that we have to find venues to lift student voices, as our students so bravely did this past June when they gathered and peacefully protested what happened with George Floyd. They brought a Black Lives Matter rally from Memorial Park to Town Hall. They did it thoughtfully, they did it peacefully, and it was actually incredibly well attended. And it reminds me the power of their voices advocating for change. It also reminds me that we cannot just leave it up to our children or young people, that the adults in the community also have to stand up, be their allies, and be there to support, and in some cases, block and get in the way and do the work on their behalf. It would be unfortunate, unfair, and to tackle this work around anti-racism and equity if we just leaned on students to say, well, here, you go ahead and talk about it. I'm uncomfortable, or I've got other things to do. Instead, the adults in the community have to stand up as well, as you are doing on Nuari, so that our students see that. They see what we're doing. We're not just talking about it, but we're taking action, and they can be empowered, therefore, to do the same. So with that, Madam Chair and members of the committee, I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and I welcome as any questions or comments that you might have. It's frankly, a brief overview of some of our efforts. I know that Joanne and Mary can absolutely help fill in where I've left off. We're proud of our work. We know that we still have a long way to go and much to do. If that can happen, though, I know it can happen in the Needham community, because it's a community that cares about its children, cares about its future, and cares about the role that we all play in society to make it a better world. So with that, we're happy to entertain any questions you might have.
Thank you, Dan. I appreciate that. I know, and thank you for sharing the early literacy program. I know that it's been a goal of many people that all children will see something in their classroom that looks like them and hear that voice. So I'm glad to hear that that's starting. I'm happy to open up for questions for the group. At some point, Dan, I'm hoping that you'll be able to wiggle in how you are measuring progress and how you're thinking about that measurement. Marcus.
Yes, thank you for sharing with us. Appreciate you coming onto the call, all of you that are helping out. I know one of the things you said is that, having uncomfortable conversations and are what we need to do more of, and how the staff and the teachers are predominantly white. I saw from the slide that you had, I think, one day dedicated, at least on the slide, to that inclusive, I think it was an all teacher event or meeting that everybody had. And I noticed that there's just one on there. And I just want to know if you feel like that's enough, or is there more? I'm sure there's more behind the scenes, but we just see one when I guess, how big and how vast this topic is. Where are you going with the direction of that, and having more of those sprinkled in, or putting more attention to that, which I'm just going by the slide, so I could be way off, but.
Absolutely. Joanne, Mary, do you want to think about?
Sure, I can start. Joanne, you jump in. Okay. Great question, Marcus. Thanks so much for that question. It is critically important. In this work, we really look at where we've been and where we really wanted to be, particularly this school year. And we've been very purposeful in shifting from the broader terminology around racial equity to really asking us a question about what it means to be an anti-racist, anti-biased school system. And so when we started to have those conversations, I don't know if it was the summer or the fall with COVID, everything sort of blends. But we realized we had to really take a step back and pause to provide an opportunity for the entire district to really go deep around what race means, what it means, what systemic racism is, and how that actually impacts us in our community in Needham. And so in a way, it certainly wasn't an intro for many of us that were there, and it was over 800 people participating in that. Professional learning was a half a day. And we certainly had folks that, were, way out of the gates on their understanding and being able to make change happen within their particular roles and departments. And then people that are really joining the conversation and building an initial understanding. From there, the plan for this year in particular was to be sure that every school had an opportunity to follow up from that professional learning day very explicitly. So how we ended that event was by asking every single participant to share using a Padlet what their actionable move would be. So we kind of spun off the title of the event. And so far we've had half the schools be able to do that already, which is fantastic. And we'll have the remaining be able to do that when we get back. And that's not enough. So in addition to that, that really helped us to launch the new DEI website, which is really meant to, obviously provide resources and be sure our staff members have the tools and resources that they need, but also to really be sure that we were being purposeful around how do we actually bring ourselves as a community to a central place where we can actually take accountability for the learning that we have to do and to find opportunities where we can build and collaborate with one another. So if you check out the website, you're going to find it's in its infancy. And that's very intentional because part of this work has been about really pushing and emphasizing as a community that we are all accountable for this. You're accountable for your own learning. You're accountable for really taking a good assessment of where you are and where you need to go next. And so that's the piece around the event on the 25th. And then certainly, there's a lot happening and has been around professional learning. It's built into our school improvement plans. There's been a lot of opportunities. We recognize that we are still in need of a really comprehensive, ongoing professional learning program for our staff. And that's something that we're in process of working on. I'll let Joanne jump in. Go ahead, Joanne.
Thanks. I would also mention that the student services group in Needham pre-K through 12 has been working for the past almost 2 years now with Gary Bailey. And one of the reasons we're doing that, Gary Bailey is a assistant dean over at Simmons and has done incredible work around anti-racist, anti-bias work with not only Simmons College, but actually internationally. And we've been working with him because we really feel that it's important to have a common language, particularly in the student service community, which includes guidance, ELL, MEDCO, nursing, and special education. And this year, we've done 3 workshops with him. And this is an ongoing program that we're going to be doing with him. So one of the things that we as a district, I think, are really committed to is not doing one and dones, but really finding ways to have ongoing work so that the work evolves as we evolve. When I think about what we have as a district have done, even just in terms of our language over the last 3-5 years, our language has evolved from really talking about culturally responsive to really being specific. We want to do anti-racist, anti-bias work in our community. And we're also doing that in terms of how do we help teachers, bring this to their classrooms. So myself and Tom Detton, who is the head of guidance, and Beth Pinos, who is a consultant that works with us, have been working with the high school faculty in terms of when these things come up in your classroom, how do you deal with them? How do you have conversations with students so that they feel comfortable and know that you're comfortable having these conversations? And again, that's an ongoing program that we're doing with the high school faculty. And I'm sure we'll look to move that down into the middle school and to the high school. So there is nothing that we're doing that is just a one-time thing. It really is something that we're looking to, what does this look like in a year? What does this look like in 2 years? What does this look like in 5 years? And we're really framing all of it around the portrait, not only of a Needham graduate, but really the portrait of Needham district, the school district. What do we look like? What do we want to look like collectively and individually when we talk about anti-racist, anti-bias work?
I would also say finally that one of the other things that's happening is that we're working with professor of practice from William James College, Naja Riley, who is helping us develop. We have a really strong social and emotional learning program, pre-K through 12. What we're doing under Mary's leadership, and Joanna's involved with several other people, and this is the work of a large group of folks, is embedding anti-racist, our culturally responsive work into our social and emotional learning framework. And Naja Riley is helping us throughout the district in different ways through consultations and workshops, make sure that we're embedding that language and those practices in everything that we're doing. So it really is in many ways a multi-layered approach. And then to get to the accountability piece, all of this is related actually. Just quickly, school improvement plans, for those of you who are not sure, every school in the Commonwealth is required to have a school improvement plan that is presented to the superintendent, approved by the superintendent, presented to the community, in this case, the school committee. And our school improvement plans are aligned with the portrait of a Needham graduate. And the expectation for me to our principals is that they have clear race equity goals in their school improvement plan. In turn, the school committee expects of me and has in my goals clear race equity goals and action steps as well. So the accountability, as well as how are we measuring student growth, what courses are students taking at the high school, and what do our discipline practices look like and our numbers, all of those metrics we've been exploring and looking at and unpacking so that we can present this to the community and look for areas of growth and improvement.
And then I think just the second part of the question that I had, along with what you're saying, and all those metrics and things that you're holding students accountable for, are the same metrics going to be in place, hold the staff and the teachers accountable for that work as well? And then
Sure.
also, you're starting at the high school level. And I know there's never a too late to start this work, but I know it's going to be as influential. And I know you're doing the curriculum, literacy curriculum, but at the younger level too, in the elementary schools and whatnot. And I know you talked a little bit about how you're going to go from the high school down. Has there been more thought about trying to get to the lower elementary schools sooner than later and kind of working up in a sense? Just because I just know like those impressionable minds and, you know, what they're going through and what they see on social media, what they have, you know, in their sphere of influence is just so great. Is going to kind of help push them to who they're going to be getting to high school.
Sure. Well, that ultimately is the goal of the racial literacy program. It's not the only thing we're doing, but that is a key component of what we're certainly trying to do. And you're absolutely right. As far as accountability, part of our evaluation system includes culturally responsive teaching. And so we actually have built in to our the evaluation system how we can assess teachers, principals, and superintendents on how they are being culturally responsive and holding themselves accountable and their students. So that's kind of baked in. Now, it's baked into our system. It is unevenly applied. And that is a goal for us to make sure that we are trying to be more coherent and more consistent with our application of our existing evaluation tools.
That's kind of what I was getting at. Thank you for explaining that a little further, just about, you know, how it was balanced.
Yeah.
Thank you, everybody.
Other questions? Ramin?
Hi, thank you for being here. I have a quick question. Is CCR a voluntary program or is it requirement? Is it required of all the students to participate?
Joanne?
So it is, I'm sorry, it is a course that students select into. But all of our students, as Dan was mentioning, part of the goal of CCOR is to present to all ninth grade students so that all of our ninth graders have exposure to this anti-racist, anti-bias work. and then we move it up through the programs.
Thank you.
Natasha?
Hi, so I wanted to thank Dr. Gutcastford for all of that information and all the work that's being done with the Real Coalition, because I think it's come a long way in a very short time. I have a couple of questions. Do you have information on the percentage of minority the students in our school system, and then the percentage of teachers and leadership, just to kind of have an understanding of what the percentages are? And I probably should know it because I have kids, I have a child in the system, but.
No, I can tell you that as of this year, I believe that we have 22% of our student body are students of color, which is a significant increase over the last 15 years. When I started, it was about 8%. So it has changed significantly. That is not true with our staff, though. Our staff has not changed in that way. We remain predominantly white. I don't have those numbers right off the top of my head, and if I go and find them, I'm going to end up showing that video to you again or something. I'll get them. But I certainly can get that information to you.
And do you, so I'm not an educator, or I mean, I'm an architect, but I'm also, I have experience with the school system. I have 2 children that have gone through the school system, completely different personalities, completely different experiences. And I've been working with other organizations. And so one of the things that I think is really difficult for students is, first of all, a lot of this information is amazing, but if it's not put into practice, it's really difficult for them to understand and put themselves in that position, right? For if you're a white student and 80% of your community or more is of a certain way, it's really hard for you to be empathetic to another group. There are kids that are that way, and there are people, everyone is trying to do their best. But I think the most difficult part for the students, those 22% of students, is feeling like they really belong. And again, I'm not a child psychologist. I don't really know that aspect of it, but I do know that part of that is understanding that the leadership and the teachers, and that there are people that are invested in that community. And so I think that there should be, and you may have them already, goals of how do you increase that. I thought it was odd that my kids, I'm Puerto Rican, that's my first language is Spanish. Then, the opportunities could be in language, right? Like the kids that have, the teachers that have, besides Monica, the teachers that I know that teach Spanish, none of them are native speakers. And so, not to say that they can't be a better teacher than a native speaker, but I mean, there are opportunities for more diversity. And so I'm wondering if there are, if there are kind of goals for that piece. And then the other question that I have is, a lot of the issues that I hear from the diverse students is microaggressions. It's not kind of a big, it's things that are happening that, including very overt things like what's happening in the, in the bathrooms and things, that the swastikas and all of that, so I'm wondering how all of that is being dealt with, because I think that sends a message of the majority, and I think it's indicative of how the minorities feel in that environment.
Well, you asked 2 really, really large questions, frankly. One is certainly about culture and the other about just the hiring. And just quickly on the hiring, yes, we do. Our Assistant Superintendent for Human Resources, Alex Montes McNeil, is very much committed to, has been making progress in, and I'm sorry I don't have that information in front of you. She did a presentation earlier this year to the school committee highlighting some of our efforts in that area. But we did, I would say, this is true for many districts, that 2 things are true. One is fewer young people are going into education nationally, and that's also true within Massachusetts. So the pool is smaller. And enrollment has not, it hasn't really declined that much in Massachusetts, although it's declining. And in Needham, it really hasn't been declining. So it's a challenge to get young people into the profession. But they are there, and there are all kinds of incredible candidates that we have to think different about how we can recruit and then support them once they come to Needham. And those efforts are underway. They were interrupted a bit with, well, not a bit, quite a bit actually, with last spring. But we have a robust plan for the spring, and certainly into the summer as we think about hiring for next year. Alex can certainly comment more on that. Regarding the culture in the school and what students may experience, you know, those things do happen. And I think what is different, as I said earlier, is that we are now responding in a different way. I'll even say, I think Joanne said this to me recently, and it may have been Dr. Bailey who said it. Now I'm losing track, but it's really stuck with me when you mentioned, Natasha, microaggressions, which is a term that I've learned about in the last couple of years, but I've also realized this, and again, I think it was Joanne who shared this with me. They're not micro to the student that they impact. That those comments about hair or the way you look or your family or whatever it might be, those really aren't micro. Those are aggressions that add up and impact and can traumatize a young person over time. And so we're really keenly aware of that and trying to figure out what we do to, as I said, call out behavior and also support that student or those students who are impacted by that behavior. Needham is not immune, both in the community or in our schools, from racist behavior or anti-Semitic behavior, where it does happen. What I'm proud of is that we're really thinking very carefully about how we deal with it, and the fact that we are dealing with it as a community, not just as quietly to the side. We erase the graffiti, we deal with the student, and we are hush-hush about it. Instead, now we are, in an appropriate, developmentally appropriate way, talking about it and sharing that information so that, in a way, the community can be involved and say, this is how we're going to respond as a community, not just set this over here in the corner and try to be quiet. It's kind of a long-winded answer to your question, but
no, that's good. And from what you just said, do you mind if I share something, Marianne and Matt? Just I was
Go ahead.
I was in, I don't know if you can see this, but we had our annual meeting at the Boston Society of Architects, and we had Dr. Atia Martin, who used to be the Chief Resilience Officer for the City of Boston. She now owns a company called All Aces, and she came in as a speaker. And one of the most interesting things that she said, and I haven't seen this chart before, so I just wanted to share it with everyone, is the increasing levels of community partnership. So, you know, you can do something that's conducive. It's going to be disruptive what you're doing. You're already, it seems like the school system is really embracing this, but it's kind of, who do you know, the decision-making process, like, you know, you can marginalize the community, or you can shift the power and ownership to the community and invest, you know, create a collaborative governance around it so that everyone feels included. So just when we, and I can share this with everyone, I thought it was a really good chart of kind of how you engage community and how you engage decision-making on all of these different groups. So I can send it to the group to add to it, but I thought she had a lot of really good slides, but this particular one felt, how do you really include everyone? Because just saying that we include people doesn't necessarily mean that they're part of the decision-making. So just making sure that the group that's working on all of this is as diverse as that you're trying to do it, I think is just as important. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thanks, Natasha. Please share. That'd be great.
Jen, I think you had a hand up earlier. Do you have a question?
I did. Thank you all for being here and sharing the exciting work that you guys are doing. I know that it's been a long journey, and it's exciting to see all the different layers of things that are happening. My question is about how you're interacting with the, I guess, the parents and the families that make up part of the community, because I'm guessing, and I guess I don't know the answer to this question, if you're getting any kind of negative feedback from parents in particular who think, oh, this is over the top, or we should be spending this time doing something else, or, you know, things are just fine. Why are you making something out of nothing, kind of thing? I'm guessing that maybe you've gotten some of that feedback, but maybe you haven't. And if you haven't, fantastic. We're way ahead than where I think we might be. But if you have been getting some of that feedback, if you have some examples of how you've been able to kind of stand firm in the leadership role that you're trying to take, and how you bring people along the journey with you.
Mary and Joanne, I'm sure, have a perspective on this from families who have offered something, or individuals. I just briefly, I guess, begin. Let me say this. This work, I've been your superintendent for 15 years. I've been in education for, I don't know, 35, I don't know how many years it's been. It's been 35 plus. And it has become clear to me, and perhaps it should have been clearer to me years ago, but it's clear to me now. This work of making sure that we can provide our students, our staff, and our families with the tools to allow for an anti-racist culture. I'm absolutely not only committed to it, but it's what we're going to do. It's the stand that I'm willing to make. And I don't know that I would have said that 5 or 6 years ago, because I would sometimes worry about, well, what does the community want to do? Or is there blowback politically? Or maybe, there are too many things on the plate. We've got to do this. We have to worry about MCAS. We have to work right now. We have to worry about COVID, which is not to be understated, of course. We have to do this and that. But I think I'm just too old and tired now to say, well, there's time to do this later. The time is now, and the work is critical. I also think it doesn't have to be an either or. We can do racial literacy work, or we can do more math instruction. I think it can be an and. And what I appreciate is that the teachers who worked on this project over the summer, and the staff members, the many dozens of them, are thinking about how to integrate this work within the curriculum at the elementary level. Now, that's a challenge. It's not easy, and it will be ongoing work. But that way you can make it an and not a, okay, today we have our race lesson at 2:00. We're not trying to make it that way. Instead, we want to integrate this work into a coherent plan, pre-K through 12, so that when our students, when they graduate from Needham High School, not only do they have the skills and the experiences they need to be successful in college or work or the military, but they also have a mindset that's anti-racist. They have a mindset that is based on equity, and they have the tools to engage in conversations that I know I certainly didn't have, and still don't have completely, as a young adult and now as an adult. So, and yes, there has been some feedback from some families. I don't think it's been strong. One of the communication pieces I shared with you on the slides that you can click on is an article that we had published in the American Association of School Administrators, No, I'm Not Colorblind. And it was a response to some parents who were pushing back on talking about race. They did not want their elementary age students to be talking about race because they believe they believe they are colorblind and that their children should be. And so we pushed a different perspective on that. So yes, there are voices that are wondering, what are we doing? But I would not say that it is strong or angry, just more questioning right now. And if someone does have if someone has a perspective that, well, I'm not interested in anti-racist work, my answer will be, well, I'm sorry, but that's what we're doing. If someone has a question, tell me more about what you're doing, or can I add to it, or can I unpack it with you? Can I understand it? We absolutely will engage in that work. But to me, it's like saying, I don't want you teaching math to my kid. Well, that's not an option. Joanne, Mary, I don't know if you've heard anything or.
Yeah, I mean, there have been instances where things have happened. We had an incident in one of our elementary schools where a young person said something very inappropriate, and it was a racial slur to another student. And I think one of the things that was most powerful about that is because of the work that we're doing in the community, the trust that we're building with students and with families, we were able to bring the two families together. And I can tell you the impact of one mother looking at another mother and saying, your child hurt my child, was powerful. And so that mother whose child said something inappropriate, who originally she was saying, oh, well, he didn't mean it. You know, he doesn't really understand what he said. It was when that mother, that Black mother looked at her and said, but your child hurt my child. That was the beginning of a greater conversation, the kinds of level of conversation that we want to have within our schools and within the community. And the other thing that I would say is that this kind of work can't only be done in the school systems. We really need your help, your community help, in really engaging people in these larger conversations, so that when things happen, whether it's within the school or in a playground or, you know, at Roach Brothers, that we have a community that is talking about this in an anti-bias and anti-racist way, which will change the conversation that we can have at the schools, at the school level. So we need to engage as many of you as possible in these conversations so that we can really create some change in terms of the way we deal with it at the school level.
Yeah, and I can tag on too to say, you know, spot on that. I think it was Andrea Vargas during the video. She talked a little bit about, you know, we're a predominantly white faculty in the Needham Public Schools, and we're a predominantly white community. And that sometimes means that there's not a lot of skill or comfort level around talking about race. And so ways that we can sort of message out there that we are doing this work and we are looking at opportunities to help support our students through this work. So to expect that if you're a parent and there's an incident that happened and you're going to get a call from the school, that approach is to bring our community together to be able to have the kind of conversations that will actually lead to change. And it's a little bit of a message. We have this, we've got you in this. It's not easy work, but it's important work. And the choice piece, just to go back there for a minute, you know, I always have such a reaction to that because this is just human rights. You know, this is really about leaning into the work, about building a future for our kids, for our students, for our children, that is future forward and is all about equity, particularly racial equity, and what we can do to actually empower them and be sure that we're eliminating barriers so that more opportunities can happen and better education can take place. I wanted to add that, you know, as far as the Real Coalition goes, personally, I believe that was a defining moment for the Needham Public Schools because it gave us structure to be able to say, this is the work that we're doing. We're eliminating barriers to racial equity. We're being sure that every one of our students is advancing and being the best version of themselves. And we have to engage with the community if we're going to be successful in this work. And so, you know, it's messy. I really appreciated Marcus's statement earlier, like, if you start from the high school and go down, like, can you? And I think part of the challenge we sometimes have around communicating about the work that we're doing is we're really doing it, you know, in a lot of different ways. It's big and it's not necessarily clean and tidy. And so some of where I think we could use some help around the messaging and being able to say, well, this is how we're approaching this. How is that looking from your end, community? How is that working? That's some real help that we could benefit from. So just being able to create that environment across, you know, in our schools, certainly, and in the community as well.
I do want to add that I know Ramin knows this, that I try to, if we can, once a year, have the principals meet with the Needham Clergy Association as another way to partner with the community and share what we're doing and share what they're doing. Because in many ways, you know, the principals and teachers are, you know, their congregation is that classroom or that school, very similar to our faith leaders in the community. And they have as they have a message to share based on their faith, principals and teachers can complement that work in a way that the community values. So I think that's been important. The last thing I'll say, and it hasn't come up too much here, I mentioned it briefly, our school resource officers, we have an exceptionally strong relationship with the Needham Police. And to me, for example, that document I shared with you on protocols and procedures, Chief Schlittler and I worked together on that document along with several other people. And that was really important to me because the chief is absolutely committed to how he can support all of our students and families. And the behind the scenes work that the school resource officers do in particular is pretty exceptional. And that goes beyond Needham. They'll partner with the Boston Police Department to support our Boston families as well. It's just really a strong and wonderful partnership that supports all of our students and staff. So I wanted to point that out about the Clergy Association and the Needham Police Department.
Thank you. We lost Jay. I'd hoped to cycle to him at some point before he had his hard stop. So it is after 7. Sue has her hand up. And so I do want to recognize her, but we're hoping that we can sort of bring this conversation to a close and figure out sort of what our next steps are and move on to some other things on the agenda, but I don't want to close it too early. So Sue.
I can be very brief. Thank you. So I was actually raising my hand just before Joanne made those terrific comments about, how the community needs to work with the schools and vice versa, because, we're not independent entities and one feeds off the other. So for instance, I think when we look at recruiting for the Needham Public Schools, and we're trying to increase diversity in our staff, one of the things that matters is Needham being a welcoming community. So the work that Nuari is doing is really important also in helping us to recruit that staff that we would like to get. And I also heard some things in the video part of Dan's presentation that I thought were really relevant for us. The idea of not, of tiptoeing around or not exacerbating racism by talking about it, but rather that we actually have to have those difficult conversations. And that was one of my takeaways from what we heard in that segment. And that, we have to take that on. And just like the Needham Public Schools are providing resources and educational opportunities, it'd be great if we can figure out how to promote that within the town to the community as well. So I just wanted to add that.
Thank you. And several people, I see you, Matt, one sec. Several people have mentioned hiring and recruiting. And we do have on our upcoming meetings, one of the placeholders is for a discussion about town hiring. I am hoping that the schools, that Alice will be able to participate with Rachel on that particular night and talk about hiring overall in the town and strategies for retaining staff of color as well. Matt.
Thank you, Mary Ann, and thank you all. It was it was an excellent presentation. Learned a lot, and great to see what's being done in the schools. As you know, I have 2 children in Needham Public Schools, and I learned from what they bring home, what they discuss, what the curriculum, what's going on in the curriculum. I just wanted to mention, and this is kind of to Sue's point as well. And my takeaway was how difficult these conversations are, and how we have to have these discussions in the public schools. And I think part of that, and I hear my kids actually talking about some of these issues among their peer groups, but I think there's a fear sometimes that when you get into certain groups that people say the wrong thing and they're almost afraid to say something from different perspectives and have to worry or couch their words. And I think, like, for example, in this group, I think we feel very open and kind of saying how we feel. And I just think as we move forward, we just have to make sure that there is that open discussion, because it is so difficult, and it's hard for a lot of people to ask those questions or say, like, is that okay to say? Or, just, I think it's an evolving conversation and a difficult one. So there's much work to do, but just want to give that perspective of, that open feeling that, that you can't kind of say the wrong thing here. If you do, then we'll discuss it and figure that out. So that's one of my takeaways, that we have to have those difficult discussions.
And Matt, with that being said, I just wanted to say, kind of piggybacking off that, these difficult conversations and things that are happening and need to happen, it's kind of a different perspective when you think about Black and brown people that can't turn off who they are, what they look like, and these conversations can't happen or not happen. You know what I mean? So the fact that there's an option for it to happen is something that it looks like that we're trying to take away, because we can't shut that off, what we look like when we come out of the door every single day. And we can't be any different than the way that, you know, we were made and who we are. And it shouldn't have to be as difficult for everyone that doesn't have to, you know, live that or be that way or be who we are every day. So just know if it's difficult for the majority, just imagine how much more difficult it is to not be able to turn that or to change that or have to live that. And those microaggressions that are really macro, that are more of a lifelong thing that some people go through, that's more of a form of abuse than anything else, because that adds up like any other kind of abuse. And there's only so much that people can take over time. So to really deep dive in and what the school system is doing is key and critical. So it is much appreciated, but just know that it's just so much deeper than a conversation. It is like, there's a lot that needs to and has to be done. And it seems like we're on that path, and I'm extremely grateful for that. So let's continue to do that deep work in the rooted of in what's embedded in us as humans. And I think what Mary said before is about, you know, the human. It's about human rights. And I think so it goes much deeper than a conversation, but I definitely understand what you're saying. I just wanted to say that as well, because I think it just needed to be said.
Marcus, I hear you completely on that. And thank you for saying that. I was in a workshop this week, and one of the things that they said in the workshop that builds on what you and Matt have said, that's I think so important for everybody to hear, is that vulnerability is a skill. We actually need to teach vulnerability as a skill so that we are all able to bring that to these conversations. And that kind of is a different frame for me in thinking about that. So I found that helpful. Natasha?
I just wanted to add one thing. Yes, and I agree with what all three of you said. And Matt, thank you for saying these things and for being vulnerable about it, because in this group, you are the minority, right? So this is how, you know, and most of us feel this way a lot of the time. And I'm lucky that I can bridge in both directions because of the way that I speak and the way that, you know, anyway. But I just want to say one thing that I think is really important is that, you know, if we don't have a diverse, if we're hiring people and are looking to hire a diverse group, we have to make sure that the people that are interviewing also understand how to make them feel welcome. Because somebody confided in me that we had a Black school administrator apply in 2016 for a vice principal position, and she felt really unwelcome. And the interviewer asked her if she thought she could fit in, and the interviewer probably didn't even know that they were offending her, and she withdrew her application. So if you really want to create a diverse group coming into town, they need to feel like the people that are interviewing them and the people that are bringing them in are going to make them feel like they belong. And so that's how you start changing the conversation. So I just wanted to bring it up, not because I want to highlight that we made a mistake at one point, but more to say we need to be mindful of how people speak to each other and to be inclusive in our hiring as well.
Thank you, Natasha. That's another power of a story again, in the way they influence the narrative. Dan, any last thoughts to wrap it up for tonight? I want to thank you for inviting us to the conversation with you. And thank you for your work in having started it. As we've talked to,
be clear, this is the community in the schools, you know, speaking their voices to get some work going. I'm trying to find the resources for the conversation to happen. I'm trying to focus our leadership in trying to do this work. But it really is something that the community, through all your voices, has expected and really been quite powerful, especially Joanne and Mary's voice. I did send the slides to Sandy so that she can, if she would, distribute them to the group so that you can, and I encourage you to take a look at that video because it has some visuals that may be helpful for you to understand what we're trying to do at the elementary level. It's a beginning, so.
Can I also just mention one last group that we've organized this year is Voices in Unity, which is our attempt to really bring the district work and the community work together. We meet monthly. I know Ramin has been to several of our meetings, and I would encourage any of you that are interested to join us. It's really an opportunity for us all within the Needham community to come together and talk about the work that we are doing individually and collectively on anti-racism and anti-bias, so we can support each other in the work.
That's great to know about. I don't think I'd heard about that group earlier. So thank you for bringing that up, Joanne.
Thank you.
Terrific. Thank you, Dan, Joanne, and Mary, all for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
And much appreciated. And we look forward to figuring out how we can work more with you for bringing the message to the community and for amplifying that message in the community so that more people are having conversations that are helpful to advancing the anti-racist work that we all think is really important in the community, and recognizing that we need to be not colorblind. So thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mary. Thanks, Joanne.
Thank you all.
So thank you, everybody. So this gets us back to thinking about schedule and deliverables. And here we just had a conversation, and I chuckle. I think we planned it for 45 minutes. It ended up being an hour and 15. So I keep saying we need to figure out how to plan our agendas better. And every time we have a longer conversation, but you know what? The conversations have been really rich, and I appreciate everybody's contributions. And I think as a group, we're collectively, holding more pieces as we go along. So it will all help, and we'll get through this, I'm sure, even if it doesn't happen on quite the timeline we were thinking about. But the real question, coming out of this will be a separate discussion that says, okay, given where the real coalition is, what does that mean for the work for Nuwari to lay out for subsequently to happen within the town? How does that fit? Is it working there? Are there additional things that need to be added on, or how can we be sure that the work is institutionalized in a way that benefits everybody? And that's another whole discussion, but I'm hoping, let's step back for a moment and sort of look at what we laid out for a schedule. Maybe if people can take a look at that. And we're going to have to think about whether we have the time to process those questions or how we're going to work that into this. So we'd shared a draft schedule with everybody as part of the meeting materials. And I'm looking at it thinking we had included tonight, thinking we would get through reviewing the schedule and also reviewing Article 17. The intent, I think, was for a relatively brief discussion tonight about prioritizing the public comments. But getting through all of those will be a challenge. All right. But if you look at it, the future, does this look like what you thought we would be looking at? How is this not looking like what you thought we would be looking at? Our goal is to be able to have a conversation about an area and then have a subsequent conversation about what are our takeaways that we feel it's important to report out to town meeting for next steps, for critical pieces of work that we recognize that are happening, for opportunities for the community to connect. I'm trying to figure out if everybody's reading and sort of processing and thinking, right?
I think I'm still having a little bit of a hard time figuring out what it is that we're going to be reporting out on, because I think that each of those topics is so big that even, we can see that every time we sit down to start talking about it, it's time to wrap up the meeting because it takes so long to kind of get into it. So I guess part of what I'm wondering is, what we're hoping to be able to report out at some point, and if we need to scale back kind of the number of areas that we're looking at, or think more about like how much we can actually say about any one of those topics. And I also don't know if this is something that people would consider doing, but I wonder if maybe having fewer meetings but have them be a little bit longer might be a way for us to keep some momentum in the discussion and maybe come to some conclusions without having to kind of jump ship halfway through a conversation and try to pick it back up again.
I think those are all things that could be discussed. I think in this schedule, we tried to be responsive to the priorities that the group had when we looked at the range of issues that were laid out. And you're right, there are a number of things here, and we also tried to be responsive to other areas that we know the town is very interested in, particularly some of the work that's around law enforcement, which is so critical right now for us to understand sort of where we are and where we can go and what needs to be changing here. But it fits within a context of what's also happening at the state. So trying to balance all those different pieces. I think when we put this on the schedule, we were hoping some of this at the state level would be set. And I don't know that I heard whether the bill was signed today or not signed today. I don't think I've seen anything, so I take that as not a good sign. But good question. Thinking about having meetings that are longer, recognizing that by the time we get into a discussion, it feels like we're pulling back out of it is a challenge, is absolutely something we can think about. I think that creates a challenge on Natasha's schedule as I'm saying that, because you are running in some nights to BBC from here, I believe.
Yes, and they used to start at 7:30, but they begin at 7. But it's every other week, so
okay.
Other than that, I'm available.
Okay. Other thoughts about what we heard tonight from the schools that you think about as key takeaways that maybe were not a piece that you had realized were happening, or something that would be valuable for the town to understand better, for us to understand better? For me.
I thought it was a very encouraging report. I feel encouraged by the amount and the quality of the work that is being done. I think I'm not sure, I'm not an expert to know whether whether the school system is doing maximum that it can be done, but I can see that they're doing a lot of work. And I think really the rest of the community needs to kind of rise up and be in the support of it and to be synergistic with the work that is being done. And I think part of our job probably, and other groups, is to rally the community to be able to be in sync with the work that's being done at school. So that's just a general thought. Specifically, I'm really interested in the 22% students of color. I'd like to understand, how did it go from 8% to 22%? Is it because of increased number of people coming into Needham? Is it because the Metco student population has increased? And also, who are these 22 and how are they and their families being supported, not just at school and through the school system? We can't make the school system just responsible for that, but in the community in general. So that would be, for me, I put a note that this is something that to pursue and try to understand and get a better feel for it.
Yeah, then also the percentage of staff that I know Dan didn't have the answer to quite just yet, as far as the comparison of majority of staff, the percentage that are a minority. I think that'd be interesting to see as well. But he did say like it hasn't changed much over the 15 years. He did say that. So I understand that it's probably really low.
I think we can safely assume it is very low.
Yeah. I assume so as well. And then just more information about the accountability of the staff and what's being done to educate themselves and being held accountable. I know he said it's worked into their plans or things like that, but just understand like really what is being done and what's actually happening and how we can better ourselves from that. Are we doing enough? are we doing enough with how often we're doing this work in our schools? You know, not saying either or, kind of like you said, but the and. But when I'm thinking math, that's something that's happening probably every day. But I think about this work, I don't know. I just don't know if it's something that's in the curriculum is happening at least once a day, you know, because it's lifelong work, like math, like social studies, like everything else. So, you know, how much are we doing? And he said it's kind of the beginning, which I understand, but I'm excited and really hopeful this is something that's going to be really embedded into the curriculum, not only with the kids, but also with the staff and how everybody's being measured.
Can I just say something?
Sure.
Marianne?
Yes, Sue.
Marcus, what you're saying is really interesting. And it also though brings me back to the part of the conversation, and I think, Matt, you were bringing us to, which is, you know, you want to make it safe, right, for teachers and staff who aren't experienced in having these conversations and in addressing racist issues to feel safe and comfortable doing so. So I think in these early stages, I think they you know, are appropriately like careful about how they're measuring it, in the sense of, I think they want the involvement and the willingness to engage in that conversation, but not necessarily, you know, like being thoughtful about how you evaluate it. Same way with like kids. So when you have young kids that, you know, actually hurt somebody, you know, verbally with a racist remark, they're trying to address that with the person who actually perpetrated that bad moment in a way that's a learning opportunity and not, you know, an overly critical moment. So it's really tough. Like I find it difficult. I'm trying really hard to be good at engaging in this. And I really appreciate the comments about vulnerability and being courageous and getting in there. But it's a lot, and I'm more engaged in it than the average person. So
Right.
I know how hard it is.
And when you say safe and comfortable, are you talking about the majority or the minority of the people having these conversations? Like the types of
Let me be
people?
careful. Let me rephrase that. I don't want to say safe and comfortable. Safe.
Yeah, that's where I was like,
Yeah,
okay.
safe is one thing, comfortable is another.
Okay.
That's fair, totally fair. I'm sorry I
All
said
right.
that. That was not my intent. So
Okay.
yeah.
Thank you. This one.
I have a question also. I agree, I mean, there's a lot going on, and I think it's great. Has anyone talked to the minority students and see how, if they feel like anything's changed, or has anyone asked them to see what they would like to see changed?
So I can tell you that we do survey often. You know, I don't know. I mean, there's a family survey that they do at least every couple years, and then there are student climate surveys that they do every year, and they do, you know, look, you know, crosstabs and look at it in that regard. So, and then there are some open, honest conversations with students, you know, in that safe group, in the courageous conversations on race. There's a lot of, you know, people that are having conversations very directly about how they're impacted and how they feel. Yeah. So from a measurement standpoint, I think you're looking at when they can do those, when they do the surveys. From a, you know, more of a focus group level conversation, that's happening more regularly.
There's also students that sit on the Real Coalition as well, from I think at least the middle school and the high school. I don't know that there's any elementary school students, but there definitely are some from middle and high school.
And again, I'm not an educator. I don't know, you know, I have a different point of view, but I don't remember my kids. I mean, my daughter was called the N-word a couple of times in elementary school, but I don't think that it was necessarily malicious, right? Where these kids learn that, that's a different story, right? But I think that the issue is more in middle school and high school, where you want to belong, you don't want to stand out. And when you do stand out by default because you are a minority, you know, I think you need support. And I'm not sure if when, you know, when the kids talk to the counselors, maybe the counselors, maybe there's a checklist and they can say, you know, do you feel like, you know, everything's going well at school? Like emotionally, are you doing well at school? When, you know, they're talking about classes, and maybe they can say, do you have any suggestion? You know, do you feel like you belong? Because I think most of the discrimination that I've experienced, or that I know others that have experienced, is not visible to others. And so I think, and it's the same thing with like, you know, when we do stuff with accessibility, most of the disabilities are undetectable by the eye. So asking the students when they're coming in to have discussions, how they, if they're doing okay, and if they feel like they have found a group or people that they can talk to or whatever it is. Again, I'm not a counselor. I don't know how to deal with this, but I just feel like sometimes they don't know that they have support. And I'm sure that the counselors want to support and that the school wants to support, but if it's not available to them and they don't see it, they may not know that it's available to them if people aren't, kind of advocating for them.
And then speaking off that, Natasha, is having those counselors, having those people, but the kids still not feeling comfortable with having conversations with them. What's the chance of having some kind of outside group or people that are not necessarily tied to the school, that where they feel a little bit more comfortable knowing that maybe the information won't go directly to that guidance counselor, thinking they may say something to somebody that they're not comfortable with. I'm just spitballing, just not knowing, and have more of these guidance counselors that probably don't look like the students, and maybe more people that do, that are part of these conversations, to feel that sense of comfort, or that sense of, that reassurance that something's going to get done and be told, and possibly be, directed at the right people, but talking to people where they may feel more safe, other than the people that are directly in the schools. Or we diversify, we do a better job with that, and having that, just throwing ideas out.
I mean, I can add that the question of belonging is on, I think it's on the Metro West Health Survey that's administered every 2 years. But one of the key questions, I think, that relates to, Marcus, what you just said, and I think is the question to students: is there an adult that in the school, do you have an adult that you feel like you could go to when you have an issue? And that is a key question that we watch really closely. I mean, it's not even close, but by all means, we want that at 100%. So that is a really critical question.
I was going to say, and
I
that
know
would,
for me, going up through high school, what it was like, and the counselors that I had, I didn't feel comfortable talking to my counselors about anything that related to race or anything like that, because they were mostly white women that I'm just like, I don't know if you feel or understand what I'm trying to say, or what I feel and how I feel. That's just from a personal standpoint of what I experienced growing up, where I grew up, and that's just, kind of how it is and kind of how it has been. So I just want to just putting that emphasis, really driving it home, Sue, and kind of what you're saying is like, get it to 100%, or there's at least one adult in the room that every child feels comfortable talking to about something that could be a little bit more serious, or someone when they feel like they can relate to, someone who would understand the struggles and things that they're going through, and not just, nothing against all guidance counselors or teachers, but when that 22% is opposed to the 90, I'm just making up a number, 97% of the teachers that are of the majority, it's tough to really feel like someone has your back if you don't know if they've ever experienced what you've experienced. And the education piece is going to be important. It has been about really getting more comfortable with having these conversations, like what was said earlier. So, but a lot of it's some kind, and I've said many times, you can't be what you can't see. Maybe you can't trust someone until you know that they've been through your struggle or been through when it comes to those really heavy topics in the school system.
and of course, you also worry about somebody becoming the person who has to carry all of those conversations, and being sure that that doesn't get completely overwhelming for that person who's also trying to do their job and then is set up so that they're not able to do that in addition. So
that's usually how it is in a lot of schools when, myself or other people are the minorities, in employees in places that you work, when you're the only Black or brown person. People come to you for the answers. They come to you for suggestions. They come to you for all these different things. And it's tough being that. So being really intentional about that. It's very exhausting. And it's something that we are just, some of us forced to kind of live with and deal with, because it's either that or people continue to go uneducated and continue to maybe do the wrong thing. So you feel like there's this burden that you don't want to carry, but you're kind of forced to, because not enough people are doing the work that they should. So it's like I said, it's a lifelong journey, and understanding and compromise. And we just don't want the kids to have to go through or feel like they're not heard or they don't have that.
right. I hear you. Extra work for sure. Thank you.
Marianne, I have just a suggestion really quickly, and I know it's 7:32. I'm looking at the meeting schedule and all of that. One of the things that we realized 3 years ago when I started working with a task force on equity, diversity, inclusion, excuse me, is we created a matrix, and then 3 years later we reconvened again, and everyone's like, we don't want to do a matrix, and then we ended up doing a matrix. I feel like that makes it a little more, you understand a little bit more of what these parts could be, because we're not trying to do the work, we're just trying to understand what all the pieces are. I might just take a stab at just creating just a quick Excel spreadsheet just to see if, so everyone can start changing it. Excuse me. So
Bless you.
see if I can make some thought of it based on other efforts that we've done, but I don't know. I'm just saying, I think it's easier to see when it's organized in a visual.
Different way. All right. So I think maybe one of the places to go back to is the original survey data that we did, because that really was where we started and then translated it into this. So maybe having both of those pieces together will be helpful. But Natasha, if you will work with me over the next couple of weeks so we have something to bring back, I would love to do that so that we can see if we can get that framework that visually also helps to say, yep, this was in fact what we wanted to do.
And it's never going to be completed. It's always going to be a work in progress, just to let everyone know. But if everyone then can look at it and start commenting, I don't know if I just gave myself a lot of work, but I feel
I'm in the boat with you.
Just even if we do it just as a big picture, then it can frame it for us a little better to see where we want to get to at a certain point, and where things need more work and other things feel like they're more on their way.
Okay, Matt, you've had your hand up a couple times.
No, that's fine. I was just, I think it related when we're talking about guidance, and I guess it's more of a philosophical question, but I'm wondering if our goal is in the public schools to have, if it is a white guidance counselor, to have people able to discuss difficult issues with them, or if it's something where we have our diverse staff or diverse guidance would be a better method of communicating that. I don't know. I'm just trying to figure out if you could ever have that, white guidance counselor, and people, would be my goal, to be able to have people come to me and share their experiences, but maybe that is not attainable because of, they haven't lived through it. So I don't know what the answer is. I was just trying to figure out what the goal is in guidance, as we move forward. Is it to educate or try to get the right cooperation, or if it's something that, different can be achieved a different way.
Marcus, do you have a thought?
Yeah, I think it's both. I think because of the way the school system's set up, we can't not have, white people as guidance counselors and leaders in the school. But it's also just being aware and being cognizant of what may go along with why you're not getting answers to certain things, and why people may not be filling out surveys as thoroughly as they could, and things like that. Just looking even deeper. Not saying that people don't understand or want to understand. It's just that it's going to be a little bit deeper with different people that you encounter throughout these subjects, is what I mean by that. So it's got to be both. There's no way, it has to be both, because we need everyone to be a part of this journey. We just have to recognize that this journey isn't the same for everyone.
Right. It's different levels of comfort. So you have to have different options so that everyone is included.
Absolutely.
And my sense from some of the work that I've seen at the college has been that as white people become more competent, have listened to more stories, have participated in more challenging conversations, that different interactions can also exist, and that they can also become the go-to person. So we will need our guidance counselors to develop the ability and the vulnerability, the skills to have those conversations so that they do become the go-to. That burden cannot fall just on the more limited number of staff of color that we have. We need the rest of us pick it up. So
I think that's why, I know we're ending, but I think, Sue, this is why I was harping on the knowing how tough it is, and like this work and how it's a beginning and everything, but it just has to be, I think I lost my train of thought, but going just within that frame is that it has to be something that has to happen. You know what I mean? It just, there's no, you know, whether it's comfortable, uncomfortable, whether it's hard, whatever it is, it's just like, it's something that needs to be done at whatever length that it's going to take. And I love that Dan said that he's all in. Maybe it wasn't 5 years ago, but where he stands now, basically, it's like you either get on board or you find somewhere else to go. Because
Absolutely.
this is what we're doing in Needham. This is going to be a part of our culture going forward. So that's one of the strongest things I took from him, and that just made me smile.
Definitely. There's that commitment for sure.
So, and I feel from the select board, our view is that's where we need to be as well. We're all in, we're going to figure this out. I'm grateful to all of you for coming each time and trying to puzzle our way through this. How are we going to navigate to bring a story to town meeting about what in fact the next work needs to be collectively across the town for all of us. So it is 7:37 or 38, whatever at this point. At our next meeting, Lisa will be coming back to work with us. We are anticipating that she's going to be providing us ahead of the next meeting with sort of 3 different statements. All right. And our goal would be that at the end of that evening that we can emerge with one draft that we collectively sort of feel like puts the stake in the ground and sets the direction for the work that we're going to go forward with. And what we want to be the vision for the work that we're doing, and that will guide all that work. So I want to warn you that that's coming out. I don't know exactly when we're going to have it, but we are expecting to have it in advance of the meeting. And I'm looking forward to having that and talking about it next time. If there is time to cycle back and review Article 17, because part of what I wanted to do with Article 17 is just have us collectively talk through what's in Article 17 so that we could sort of use that as a way to agree what particular pieces we want to focus on in the agenda when these topics come to the group, and be sure that folks who are coming to talk about them with us have that lens from the request in Article 17 when they're coming to speak with Nuwari. So we can talk about that then. Any other thoughts for tonight?
I just wanted to leave with this one thing that's kind of on my brain, and that is that the school, 5 years ago, I would say it was a much different audience, bringing kind of stories and calls to action about what was going on and what, at least from the Human Rights Committee, what we were hearing about what was going on. And I think that we've made leaps and bounds of progress in a lot of that. And I want to just say that the equity report, the equity audit, and the report that came from it really was a great way for all of us to learn a lot of information. And because the woman that did the audit did speak, one-on-one with students and with parents and with teachers, I think she was really able to get a good feel on the ground of what things were happening. So kind of all the barriers that we've all talked about in terms of why people might not report things that were going on, she really was able to break through and get in a lot of really hard to read and sit with information, but stuff that was like, wow, now we have all this information and we know the places that we need to work on it. And so I think that the district has worked really hard on a lot of different levels, but I think that without that report that they had to kind of anchor what they were going to do and inform what directions they were going to take, it wouldn't be the same. We would have much less to kind of look back on and decide how we're measuring success or not. And so I know that Article 17 has a lot of different pieces into it, but to me, one of the things that when I was learning about it and hearing about what people were looking for, it was kind of a similar effort to really have somebody independent come in and look across the board at all the systems that we have in place here that could help us figure out where it is that we need to do the work going forward. I think that kind of having an independent set of eyes on what's happening really helped inform a lot of the great work that the schools are doing now. And I think that it's something that could benefit a lot of different areas in town.
So I do think that that's true, Jen, and I hear you on that. The question about an equity audit, though, comes at a time when the schools have done an equity audit that we're not going to go back and redo right now because they're still in midstream in their work, which is a huge chunk of the issues that have come forward. Okay, we're in the middle of an independent set of eyes on our police right now. Okay, that we're expecting information back from that. Again, another hugely critical area where there were a number of concerns that were expressed. So I think the sense is that we kind of want to get those two pieces. And then this group, I think, should appropriately have a conversation about what, in fact, do we really want to audit? And where do we need to bring in those specific eyes to take a look at different things? So I think there's a benefit to our doing sort of the survey that we've kind of laid out, getting a sense of where we are. And then I think we can have a very concrete discussion about what are the things that we would want to charge somebody to come in and take a look at and examine and understand for us. Does that make sense maybe as a strategy given what's in place?
Yes, sure, it does.
Marianne, how soon is this video posted to our site? Or how long does it usually take to get it there?
The video.
Sorry, our recording of this, of our group.
Usually by tomorrow, Marcus.
Okay, I just wanted to know, I think this is going to be a really important one to share with a lot of people.
Well, and I
Not
think
saying that they're all not, but I'm school system, I just know this community is going to want to, that people that don't know, and there's so many families that I know and that are going to really, I think, just want to deep dive this and understand more. And I think we should definitely do that and share.
And we'll also have the presentation shared with the links so people can go take a dive there.
And I think communication and visibility of the work that is happening here for those who are not as, aware is going to be really important, because I think there's a lot of really great work that's happening all over town, and this is kind of consolidating it to some degree. So I think it's really important, and I'm not sure what the best way of communicating this is, but I'm just throwing it out there that sometimes communication can be really helpful in inclusion.
It is the perennial challenge that we talk about all the time. How can we actually get the word out about good things that are happening in town to more people when they are happening, and about ways that we want to hear from people, because in fact we do want to hear from people and figure out how to make it better. So Sue's referred to the survey, the parent survey. I think the parent survey just wrapped up, right? It just completed maybe around Thanksgiving time. Am I correct that there was
that was a survey specific to COVID and the learning approaches for this year. But there on the Needham Public Schools website, there's a lot of different surveys that have results from surveys.
It might be interesting for us to go and pull that statistic that we've talked about. Do you feel like you have an adult in the building that you can go talk to, and just for us all to be grounded in what that number is, and appreciate your view that the goal is 100%. And I know from prior conversations, the first time that we had a discussion about that in the middle school that Joe Barnes did years ago, the goal was 100%, and we weren't at it then either. But it's hard work to be able to reach everybody, but it's really critical work. So,
Marianne?
Matt?
And speaking of surveys, we do a town-wide survey that's statistically relevant. It might be something that this group would want to come up with a question or two to include on that survey when it goes out, because it does go to and Kate, I don't know if you want to just briefly talk about it, does actually go to a number of households, and we try to get real data from that.
Yeah, it's a statistically valid survey, which is mailed because that's still the most valid way to get a survey. But we did open it up for additional online the last time. We've done it every year since 2000, every other year since 2008, but we had to skip 2020. So I assume we'll be doing it this spring. And I will send a link to it to everyone so you can see what the results of the last study were. And we usually have the opportunity for 3 open-ended questions if we want to get to create, not open-ended, but custom questions where if you wanted to get at a particular thing, that would be going on this spring. So that's a great point.
Natasha.
I just wanted to add as a parent of a teenager and teenagers and whatever, they don't tell parents as much as you would like. So even if you have parents respond, they may not know all of it. That's why I think it's important to survey the students as well in a way that they feel comfortable responding and not feel like they will be stigmatized by anything. But they're the ones that may not even understand what they're experiencing, but they're the ones that we really need to hear from. And I don't know, again, I don't know how to do that, but I think it's pretty important to hear from them because the parents may know part of the story, but not the entire story. And it depends on the kid. Some kids talk a lot, others don't. So
I was going to say, some of us have families with one of everything. So absolutely.
I think that the students are surveyed separately. And I want to say that in both the parent and the student survey, that it's roughly about 25% of the folks that are responding that are saying that they don't have, that there are times that they don't feel comfortable or safe in school. That was my recollection the last time that we looked at it on the Human Rights Committee a couple of years ago.
So we can pull that out from the Metro West survey and take a look at that. I think there's usually some data about how that's tracked over time, but we could pull that out and just have it as some follow-up material for people for next time to take a look at. We are at 7:48. Do we want to have some more comments or are we ready for a motion to adjourn for this evening? They were not ready. I need a motion.
Yeah.
I motion to adjourn.
And a second?
Second that.
All right. Otherwise, we could keep talking all night, I'm sure. Let me just quickly go around for a vote. Matt?
Yes.
Stu?
Yes.
Jen?
Yes.
Marcus?
Yes.
Ramin?
Yes.
Natasha?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Thank you all.
Thank you very
I wish
much.
you a wonderful holiday and we'll
Very
look
nice
forward to
meeting.
see you on January 4th.